GM. GM, everybody. My name is Churro. I am the community manager here at Offchain Labs and really excited to lead this AMA today. We have Alchemy. We also have CyberConnect. So super excited to have Dan and Ryan with us today. We're going to be talking about all things account abstraction. This is our third episode with Alchemy. So really excited to welcome you guys to the stage.
Hey, it's good to be back.
You
GM.
GM.
Yeah, so I guess to get things started, we'd love to do some short introductions with you guys. So I'm gonna pass this over to Dan. So you can share some intro, and then Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. I could kick it off. So, you guys, if you tuned into the previous episodes, then you probably heard a little bit about my intro. More recently, I've been doing a lot of education in the Web3 space for quite some time now. More recently, excited about account abstraction and everything that it unlocks for us. So, super excited to be here today with Ryan, co founder of CyberConnect, to talk about what it's unlocking for them.
Amazing. I can do a quick intro of myself. I'm Ryan. I'm co-founder of CyberConnect. CyberConnect is a social network protocol. We've been working on bringing social to Web3 for the last 3 years now. And we work very closely with Alchemy on and Arbitrum on bringing users to Web3 to on-chain through a counterfactual wallet that we built, which is called Cyber Wallet. More on that later.
Sweet. Okay, well, I guess we can go ahead and jump on into it then. So I'll be asking some questions to hear for you here, Ryan. So I guess we can go ahead and begin. Could you tell us a little bit more? So you gave us an introduction about CyberConnect. Could you tell us a little bit more about your team's mission and what problems you're solving with account abstraction?
Right, the team's mission, we started in 2021, where we really see that there gotta be different use cases than DeFi in Web3, and we've been building with the creators and social networks before from our previous lives. And so the team started building the infrastructure layer for social networks, which is a decentralized user-owned social network. Users can own their profile, their content, their identity, and their social graph. Throughout the last couple of years, we've been building that. We have shipped one product called Link 3, which is a Web3 LinkedIn. Arbitrum is a client as well, and we have probably more than 3,000 organizations using Link 3, and that's entirely built on top of CyberConnect's protocol. So yeah, the goal was really to bring user-owned identity to Web3. And after 2 years of building CyberConnect, we've seen a big problem and also a big opportunity to explore the user onboarding experience. Almost 60% of the users onboarded through like CyberConnect had their first transaction on chain with us, and then later on they went on to explore, let's say, DeFi, DEXs, Perps, or a lot of DGen stuff, or NFTs. It seems like it's a good a gateway for users to get into Web3 through something that they feel a little bit more familiar with, like social activities or just seeing people that joined Web3 through social apps they can just join and hang out with. That's why we started Cyber Account and Cyber Wallet. Cyber Account is more like behind the scene smart contracts, and Cyber Wallet is the UI that we help onboard users to different chains. And yeah, that's when about mid 2023 we launched our Cyber Wallet, Cyber Account, the 437 compatible account abstraction wallet. And so far we have deployed about 1.5 million wallets on different chains now, working with a couple close partners on the client side and a lot of great folks on the tech provider side. Of course, our Alchemy is our great partner there. Yeah, and I think it's been a great journey so far, learning with you guys to build 437 onboarding experience.
Whoa, that's really exciting. So 60% of users have had their first transaction, Web3 transaction through CyberConnect then, right? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
That's an amazing statistic. That's super cool. It's like onboarding the mainstream users here. Do you see like for Link 3 and for CyberConnect that you are able to sort of translate the value of Web3 to your users in a way where they can see it through your application? Is that something that's coming through to them?
I think the first step is really just getting them familiar with the space, right? Like a lot of them weren't really sure what's gas, right? Like it's even like they're having a hard time figuring out what to do with their C phrases, and then how do they get their first gas? And when it comes to like L2, like Arbitrum, they gotta find gas either from Ethereum or they from another central exchange. So there's a bit of complexity, and we're just trying really hard to onboard them first, and then they can explore more stuff on Arbitrum or on any other chains in Web3 through this some single entry point, wallet being one, and then Link 3 being the other, like more explorationary on the social side.
Well, that makes a ton of sense. So you mentioned like gas being like a big sort of issue for users coming in for the first time. It's like a weird thing for somebody to get familiar with, right? So how has like account abstraction been a game changer for you and what you're building?
Yeah, it's a great question. Specifically for gas, we had two kind of two target users. One is definitely the ones who are very familiar with Web3, who've done a lot of stuff on, let's say, Ethereum, or let's say they've done something on alternative L1s like Polygon or BNB chain. But then like they want to try out Arbitrum, like they want to try another L2. They've seen great traction from one of the apps here. Then they got to figure out, how much ETH or how much um, Polygon that I have to swap into ETH and then a bridge to Arbitrum, which is a kind of a big hurdle, right? You don't, like, as a normal user, you don't really want to have all your ETH scattered around as gas on different chains. So that's the first group of users who are trying to target. Like they're like Web3 explorers. They're very familiar with Web3, but they only have so much time and resources to explore. So we want to help them kind of abstract away the chains, especially the gas on different chains, through what we call a smart gas. The smart gas basically acts as like a prepaid gas tank where you pay on your whatever chain you are really familiar with. We're deployed on almost every EVM chains where they can just deposit the native gas from that chain. Let's say ETH on most of them, Polygonmatic or BNB for BNB chain. They can deposit those native gas on those chains and then use it on Arbitrum, use it on other L2s or L1s interchangeably. So that's what's been super helpful from an account abstraction perspective, right? Like the paymaster behind the scene sorts out all the different accounting for the users and then pay gas for them and then charge on the user's smart gas balance. So that's what we do for like the Web3 natives. The other group is really just newbies or who are like very new to the space or very new to the specific app, and they just want to try out something quickly, and hopefully that doesn't cost them money. And most likely it's the gas that's most likely being the first uh, hurdle for them to onboard. So we work with layer one, layer twos to do very or apps on layer one, layer twos to do very specific gas sponsorship campaigns. Recently, we've done one with another L2 that they've done like a gasless get together campaign where they gather a couple projects and sponsor 3 ETH for those projects, and for users onboarding through Cyber Wallet, they can enjoy a gasless transaction on those 4 projects throughout 2 weeks. And we've seen pretty good traction, and then eventually those users do return, and then the gas sponsorship actually made sense dollar-wise in the long run. So that's kind of interesting, and we're still working with the leading L1 and L2s as well as the projects there to provide those gasless experiences.
Oh, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, for me, I mean, like somebody who's been using it in this space for a while, like I'm so happy that Etherscan, like when I look at my account, it tells me all the chains that I have some money on because I have like accounts where it's like it's spread across like 10 different chains, right? Like just enough to be able to interact with the apps. So there's like gas money everywhere, you know, and it's like a really tough experience, even for somebody who's been in the space for a while. So I could totally appreciate everything that you're saying there. So what has been like some of the more bigger challenges for you implementing account abstraction since you've sort of targeted this as a feature that you'd like to use?
Well, there's a ton of challenges. I think we're the first one, literally the first one, bringing more than 1 million user ops onto account abstraction in the early days last year, June-ish. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like, well, the first challenge is really bundler is a very, very separate thing than what we're so used to with the Ethereum clients or the RPC nodes. So bundler itself is just a beast in its own sense, right? Like we had to work with the leading bundlers in the space, especially Alchemy, to really figure out like how can we make sure whatever user sends will land on that chain, and then uh, like having that separate user path going through bundler makes it even more harder if it's like behind the scene there's multiple chains, and every chain has their own um, inclusion kind of mechanism, right? Like Polygon gets a little bit more reorg, but then it's a little bit harder to get included, and Arbitrum is a lot safer in that sense. But then there's L2, L1 gas, which you got to figure out on the bundler side with the gas estimate, so that users feel comfortable doing that. And then so the entire bundler is really hard. I think it's really hard to get it right, and Alchemy is doing a great job making that so much easier for developers like us to really leverage the infrastructure that you have. And the second is really speaking of gas, like L2 are not the most like are not getting the most benefit from account abstraction, just because the most of the cost as we look into it is going through the L1 gas fee, where the call data is being kind of settled, or not settled, but like being written back to L1. That call data is just tremendously bigger than the EOAs, which means it's just 5 times probably more expensive than the EOA transaction. And we're really, really, really excited to see how 4844 comes out and how that would really hopefully dramatically change the account abstraction on L2s, so that we can help Alchemy and projects on Alchemy onboard users so much better. Otherwise, we're basically 5 times more expensive than EOAs. Right. So those are the two, like following the like just to make sure 437 kind of works. It's been a year, and we're still very, very excited to see the developments. And then there are the more stuff that's like looking down the line, right? Like you have, how can we make account abstraction more native, right? You don't want everyone to spin up another A account and then kind of have that memorize that new address memorized, and then migrate all their assets from UA. That's for the crypto native ones, and then for the newcomers, they gotta figure out how to onboard to that account. Like, and then sometimes that account, most likely the account will have different addresses on different chains, because the nature of a smart account address is yeah. So making account abstraction native is what we hope to see coming down the line. There are really a ton of innovation happening there, right? Like a 7560, and then there's like some older like opcodes are trying to get included, that are coming back again. Yeah, that's also very, very, very interesting. And lastly, I think modular is like making sure users can leverage the modular account abstraction, like really leveraging not only the gas sponsorship, but also the more dynamic authentication, which like Alchemy has been pushing, like 6900, and then the other modular standards where how can someone add session key back to their account, or how can someone add, let's say, multisig to their account. which have been like, we've heard a lot of those, but it's just still kind of expensive, kind of like not that easy to educate user on. But I think those are what's going to make account abstraction really stand out in the long run.
Yeah, those are some really great points. And just like the trade-off space of accounts is so huge, right? And you kind of mentioned a little bit of this idea that like you have crypto natives and then you have new Web3 users. We're looking for those like mainstream users who are eventually going to interact with these apps. They may not even know there's a blockchain behind the scenes, but they are interacting with Web3 in some capacity. There's definitely so many different trade-offs, and it's like the trade-off space is even larger in the sense that you think that Web3 is going to hit on so many different use cases, right? So like I always say that for DeFi users, for somebody who's like making a large transaction, they probably want their first feature, the thing that they really care about is security, right? They want to make sure that they can set up their own like security mechanism. They probably already have a way that they do it today, and they want to make sure that that is still supported when they use these DeFi apps in the future. But maybe for social or gaming, right, you might have a user who doesn't really care about the security as much, maybe not at first, but maybe eventually that becomes like an important part of their lives, and they decide, hey, I really do need to figure out like good security practices around how to secure my account because now this account matters to me, right? So we need to think about like, how do we easily onboard users, especially like thinking about some users don't really care to learn about what a seed phrase is, and before you start to have them join your account. And then how do we also like get the crypto natives into our application, make them happy with the fact that we can actually interoperate with some of the other accounts that they've used in the past, right? It's a big challenge. With all of those trade-offs in mind, I mean, it's a big question, but what would your like ideal account look like on chain? Like, how do you think about that?
Right. Well, I mean, I believe Alchemy as well. Like everybody in this working on the account abstraction or user onboarding during like this sector, people will talk to each other all the time. We're always like imagining what would be an ideal onboarding experience. And I kind of get the sense that there wouldn't be one account that suits all, or like one default setting suits all. It's just like your Gmail, everybody would have different setups with their authentication, and then how they would delegate their control to other maybe bigger orgs or like whatever custom setup they have. So I would probably have two profiles, kind of two setups that I'm particularly interested in. Well, the first one is really that optimizes for user experience. When I say that, it's like it optimizes for not just the newcomers to Web3 who are really, really like used to the experience that they've been enjoying with traditional Web2 apps. Like they wouldn't want to remember a C phrase or have to go through a Chrome plugin or have to go through like the mobile wallet kind of wallet connect, that interface where you're switching apps just trying to log in. So for those kind of users who want to have a better your experience, I think one is somebody you have to manage the initial C phrases for them, and then the account abstraction comes in right after, so they don't need to really understand what's behind the scene with the account. So that leads to, I think, a passkey plus account abstraction wallet type of experience, where either the passkey is being natively supported on chains like Arbitrum, with some of the RIPs coming out, or some custodial, semi-custodial, or non-custodial solutions where they do passkey authentication for you. I think one of them is our great partner at Turnkey. They do a great job at doing non-custodial passkey authentication, and then that's directly bind to an A account, and then that A account handles all the gas, all the hopefully in the future do more chain abstraction or even like asset subtraction where they don't need to know this USDC lives on which chain. But at this point, at least the gas is getting sponsored or getting abstracted away. And users have an easier way to kind of either pre-deposit some gas, or the developers can help, let's say, sponsor some gas with either Alchemy or with Cyber Wallet. We've been working on with a couple really good projects on those fronts. And the other setup, I think, is more. I think the other setup is just more. I wouldn't say it's insecure, but it's like just more simple, where they just do like an MPC or more custodial, either MPC or custodial, where, well, we just don't care about how much we want to be on chain, but like as long as the key is not is invisible to users, and maybe it's just like extremely centralized, it's still okay. I think that would still get us to the point where more users will onboard Web3 without fearing losing their private key, right? And they don't need like really more complex setup, or it puts too much pressure on like you developers building, like deploying account abstraction wallets for them, or the chains being more generous on gas on sponsorship for some of the L2s. Yeah, that's like where I'm kind of seeing getting more adoption throughout this cycle for new users to onboard.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I keep saying this. I'm pretty opinionated about this myself. Like, I consider myself pretty crypto native. I've been in the space for a while, and like, there's a lot of Web3 games coming out. And when I go to a Web3 game, if the first thing I have to do is connect a wallet, or God forbid, have to like buy something, I'm not playing the game. You know, like it's just, there's no way, even though I want to try these things out, like that's just not what I want to do. I want to see if the game's any fun first, right? So, like, even for crypto natives, like I feel like that first experience has to be good. It has to be onboarding, quick onboarding. And, you mentioned this as well, as like when you're first trying out a game or a social app, like you don't really care who has the private key, right? Like I don't even have any value against this account or this experience, this relationship that I have with this application. So at that point, like, I don't care about the security model, right? Like I just want to try your app. I want to see if I like it. I want to play around with it a little bit. And then eventually, like, I'll be like, oh, wait, how is this all secured? Like, let me start thinking about that and like playing around with my account, and then just being able to have that flexibility later to be able to like add like a pass key, add like some sort of like a backup recovery mechanism. Those types of things is like really, really pivotal.
Right. I think there's also like this other kind of trend or a hypothetical model, right? Like where you get like a ritual, not like the create two type of what do you call them? Like the counterfactual addresses. But then like you just start playing around with that address, and then everything's behind the scene, and then you do like more sophisticated like session key with every app, where you don't really like, it's all done like more behind the scene as well. Like you don't really need to know are you signing anything, but then you're kind of delegating that to some central party, where most likely it's the developer. And then in the end, like you do more complex key management, like you said, to do more self-aware kind of security model, and start to get in like to add more secure methods like passkey or 2FA or whatever, when it gets to that point of your life cycle in that game or in that ecosystem.
Yeah, I believe we mentioned this for the viewers out there in episode 2 about counterfactual addresses. And just to define that, like essentially you can, for the user, figure out what their address is going to be before actually deploying any code there, right? So if we talk about like a smart account that's going to live on chain, it costs you something to initialize that account. But if we know where that address is going to be, we can start doing stuff with that address before you've initialized it. And that's really helpful. I mean, for me, like, a really good experience that I had recently was I tried out Sunflower Games, which was like this Web3 game where I was able to like play it, and I didn't even know they were creating an account behind the scenes. They actually sent me like an NFT, and I didn't even know that that had happened until I was able to like dig into the settings and go and see that. and they had like an NFT already in my account, which had no code in it because it wasn't initialized just yet. So clearly they were making use of that counterfactual address, which was super cool to see. And I was already on chain. I didn't even know it yet, right? Which is really awesome.
Right.
Awesome. So I guess, this is where we can kind of get into more like maybe interesting. Well, I don't know. This whole thing's been interesting, but maybe like zooming forward like 5 years and thinking out like what is this all moving towards, right? Because like we're talking about a big trade-off space, and we're talking about like a lot of changes that are happening now. And I think, hopefully devs who have been watching this and users who have been watching this the last few episodes are starting to get a feel for why account abstraction is so important, right? We're really opening up this whole box of trade-offs where we can take a look at the different experiences we want to create for users and what those different experiences mean and what users might want. If we fast forward 5 years to, let's say, the year 2029, and we think out that far, CyberConnect has, potentially onboarded, like you said, 60% of like 1 million accounts. So let's say like potentially like 600,000 users who have never transacted with a Web3 account before. Is that fair to say? I just taking some of the numbers that you had before.
It's a little bit more than it. It's 60 out of 2 million. So
okay, so even more. So then we're talking more about 1.2 million users potentially who have never interacted with on-chain before. So I mean, maybe 5 years is even too far in the future. But what I wanted to ask is, do you think that by the year 2029, we'll see 1 billion users having interacted with the blockchain somehow? This is like a big number, right? I mean, we're still talking about a scale increase of 1,000, but 1 billion users who have interacted with the chain, with a chain somehow, even if they don't even know it. Do you think that's possible? Do you think that's something that we'll see?
I actually think it will happen as long as there is some app that's like more useful to the general public. I think there are a ton of very interesting ideas here. If you look at the history of other tech, like they do go through a very long, very long history of adoption. Let's say AI is getting really hot recently, but then they've actually been around, especially the neural networks have been around for so long. Like even when I feel like when I was in school, like 10 years ago, it's like really old fashioned tech already that's not getting picked up. But until like very much later on, it's the things are going to work out in the way that they were designed in the first place. It's just like very path dependent. But to put into retro, it's like for us, as long as like I think making a state change or commit or any commitment on chain is what enables a very different type of design paradigm for developers and very different way to organize the networks around that specific code-driven community. And I honestly believe there will be more than 1 billion unique users that have made at least some transaction or some state change on any blockchain, any L1, L2, or even L3. And as a matter of fact, it's coming from two ends, right? Like the users will, like right now, more and more users are really accustomed to a token. Well, that's the first place, and then they're getting more accustomed to what's on chain, what's so different about it. And then from the other side, infrastructure providers like Arbitrum or like other blockchains, and as well as Alchemy and bean tech providers are bringing much better experience. Even versus like 2 years ago, it's so much better experience already. I can definitely see multiple forces driving that adoption. And for us, we're always trying out how can we cater towards new users? How can we bring on more users to on-chain? And we'll always be at the forefront of bringing new apps out there, making some creating value prop really to users who don't care whether it's on-chain or not, but actually in the long run, that helps, like the on-chain part really helps being the driver behind an app or an ecosystem. So yeah, in short, yes, I truly believe in getting 1 billion users on chain.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time for me right now because I feel like when I joined the space, the big entry into the space for me was actually the first ETH Denver. I went to the first conference there, and that was really.
When was it?
What did you say? How was it?
When was it? What year was it?
2018.
2018. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Similar.
Oh, similar. Whoa.
Yeah.
How about that?
Right. I mean, I got in like based on at the time it was like a lot of Cosmos stuff, a lot of it was very different, and there was like EOS and like very different. But
Yeah, a lot of projects, were exciting back then and haven't really panned out as much. And there's a lot of things that are just super interesting, right? Like themes that were too soon, right? Like even in some way, like the Cosmos idea of how things work was a little too soon. And I think a lot of that's actually really the theme of what I was thinking about is this idea that a lot of the applications that people were talking about at that conference in 2018 were way too soon, right? And it was like, it's almost like the space, like we got really excited about what decentralization is, and we were like, what can we build with decentralization? And I was talking to people at the tables next to us while we were hacking, and they had these like amazing ideas, like these crazy ideas that like I don't hear anyone talking about anymore, which is interesting because we sort of had like this pushback from reality that was like blockchains are really hard to build on, and like that forced us to say like, okay, what can we build on blockchains? But it's now getting to a point where, like you talked about this, right? The potential is that we could actually make it so now blockchain products can start to think about, applications can start to think about the cost of gas as being like a user acquisition cost, right? And start to actually like hide these sort of like user experience issues. And we can actually get it to the point where it's like scaling up to, having millions of accounts on chain like you guys have been able to do. And so it's like an exciting time for application developers to actually start thinking about bigger picture again. What is a valuable use case that we can actually start to build on blockchains? And like, I know Chris Dixon just put out Read Write Own, which was actually a really great read. And in that, like he likes to frame it as like computers that can make credible commitments. And it's like, okay, what does that actually bring us as application developers? I think is like, it's a really interesting time as an application developer to say like, what kind of like benefit does that give me, an advantage versus these other applications out there that can't make credible commitments, so super interesting.
Well, it's amazing that you said, 'cause I didn't know you were coming from the 2018 batch. So so we were actually building on Cosmos. We were the very first chain that launched with Cosmos back in 2018, and then we onboarded 30 million users with the app. It's a live streaming app. We had PewDiePie, a mainstream streamer with us for a year, and with more than 100,000 streamers. So everything was built on a chain that we custom built, just because there wasn't a chain that we can see the gas fee being reasonable and the TPS being reasonable. So we had to build our own chain. And then we onboarded 30 million users, which more than a million daily active, and way more TPS than any chain could support at that time. So everything had to be like hand built, and then there wasn't really on ramp, so we had to build on ramp ourselves. There wasn't really like access to whatever economy there is, so we had to build a lot of that on ramp, off ramp. But yeah, it was totally different. There wasn't like Alchemy was like also very early at the time, right? Like so yeah. So CyberConnect started out as really like building infrastructure and working with like other infrastructure provider to build like the foundation layer for people to build stuff on. And now we feel like we're very, very comfortable to a point that more developers can build much more sophisticated apps on top, much easier. And no one really needs to like go through that pain again to build another, like the chain of their own design, and then coming all the way up the stack to build like finally that one app.
No, that's really interesting to hear. It's like, I feel like a central theme to everything we're saying is like, I mean, it's so important. We talk about this all the time. Like you hear about this in startups, is that timing is everything, right? And it's like, when it comes down to it, the timing now is it's really starting to change the way that you can build on Web3. All the tools and everything that are available to you, especially with account abstraction and with blockchain scaling, the blobs are coming, right? We got 4844 coming around here, and it's just, yeah, no, it's a super exciting time and a really important time for application developers to be paying attention. So that's super cool. So I do have another question for you that's more of a black and white question, like a Boolean sort of. Do you think that so if we get to that big number, right? We talk about like 1 billion users interacting with the blockchain. Do you think it's more likely that the majority of those users will know that they're interacting with the blockchain, or do you think it's more likely that they won't know that they're interacting with the blockchain?
Well, I think they will. It's like couple examples where, like, when you are first trying to make a transaction on the internet, you don't really know what's behind the scene. Like, is it secure that whatever I type into that box will like actually get to only one person on the other side, or like will actually will not be like misused. But at the end of the day, like, I think internet did catch up to like all the basic text, like the basic technology terms, and people do understand. My mom doesn't understand, like, oh, this is kind of safe. Like, tapping Apple Pay doesn't really destroy your phone or like gets all your money drained. So people will catch up with that, but like the sophistication might not be, right. Like, my mom doesn't know the entire stack of the internet, how the network stack works, but she knows the basics. It's like, probably end of the day, people wouldn't know, like, oh, everything, the L2 is based on another L1, and then like this L3 is probably based on another L2, and there are so many different intermediaries. But I think they would know that, like, as long as you own that something controls your wallet, then you actually own assets, own the data, own everything belonging to that, and they have the confidence of doing something is really self-sovereign. Versus, it's very similar to what how internet really changed people's behavior around information and around like money on the internet, right? Like, I think that will happen, and people will be very aware that they're using a blockchain under the hood.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I was just laughing in my head because I was thinking of I don't know what grade it was in, but like I don't know, like I forget when the internet even came out and started getting mainstream for me, but it was like in grade school. And I remember like one of my teachers saying that HTTP stands for hop to the place, right? It's just like it's funny because it's just like I don't know whether she said that like to break it down for us as kids and she just wanted a funny way to like say it, or she actually believed that. I don't know. But like it is funny that the internet exposes things like HTTP. You see it on the URL in the browser
Right.
bar. And it's like that's exposed to users, but maybe most of them don't know what that actually stands for, right? I think most people would be hard pressed to tell you what it actually stands for. And so like it is interesting to think what kind of artifacts of blockchains will be exposed in the user experience, you know, at its final form. Like when we finally onboard the billions of users, what kind of artifacts of blockchains will they see? Yeah, it'll be super fascinating because they'll have to like at some point have like a place where they see their state and know that that is some place that's going to interact with all these other applications and kind of like their home spot for interacting across the web. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens over the course of 5 years.
It will be. Yeah, right. Hopefully it's just not. Hopefully it's not just like us nerds talking about the specifics. Like, hopefully nobody really care about nobody will talk about a abstraction, this term, anymore. It's like nobody will talk about HTTPS, but what does it mean on their day-to-day life? But that just is like so much baked into what they do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Also, Ryan, so I do want to say congratulations on the launch of your L2. That was pretty recent, right? It was last week or very recently. Yeah.
It was. Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, as we were trying out to build with the developers, we just figure we gotta build with them in every capacity, and then help along the way, right? Like bringing down the cost of doing transactions on chain, making account abstraction native. Those are very much the core of what we do here.
Awesome. Cool. Any closing thoughts for you before we close off here?
Well, I think if you are building something that is, especially if you're building, definitely if you're building something on chain, or you're thinking of building something on chain in the audience, or you haven't figured out what to build, but like you want to build an app that kind of touches more users, not just in the trading kind of area, we'd love to talk to you. Like, find me on Twitter. I'm Ryan Lee _me on Twitter, and please talk to Alchemy to really get support on that technical journey, and find definitely your partners in all these different ecosystems and communities in Web3. And yeah, we love to build with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan. Yeah, find Ryan on Twitter, Ryan Lee _me, you said?
Right. Yes.
And stay tuned, because we got coming up on the next episode. We're going to be on episode 4. We're going to be looking into ERC 6900, which Ryan mentioned a keyword there, which is modular. We're going to be talking about how accounts can get modular. And we're also going to be building embedded account user experiences. So you could start to see how you can build experiences like the ones that Ryan is talking about, so you can onboard millions or even potentially billions of users one day. So thank you so much for coming on here, Ryan, and it was so good to have you.
Thank you, Dan. Looking forward to chat soon.
Thanks. Take care, everybody.